Thank you everyone for joining me. My name is Wes Maggio. I'm an application specialist here for Wacom Technology and your presenter for this morning or this afternoon, wherever you may be. Our agenda is fairly simple. Despite it being simple, however, it is very robust, and this is it right here. What we're going to be doing is basically going over a number of different things specific to tablet users, as you would imagine. This is a Wacom tablet webinar. But what we're going to be going over is essentially ways in which you can increase your productivity, or what I like to say, pump a little caffeine into your workflow. Work more intuitively, more efficiently, so that, again, you can get more out of your applications and out of your own creativity. I'd like to start off my presentations with going over what it is we're going to cover, and at the same time, what we are not going to cover. I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands and gets out of the webinar today everything that they came for. I'm going to go over the tablet that I'm using today, which is Intuos 4, very briefly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it's important that you understand exactly what I'm using and how it can apply to your particular workflow. Into the heart of the material that we're going to cover, I'm going to talk about ways in which you can brainstorm your ideas, ways in which you can get more ideas out up front early on in the creative process, so that you don't necessarily go too far down the rabbit hole, I like to say, in a particular design, only to find that perhaps you should have gone another way. After we come up with an idea, we're going to take a look at ways in which you can enhance images. And I'm going to ask a few questions in a few moments about image enhancement and about your use of a tablet, and then how that will pertain to our content today. In addition to enhancing images, oftentimes one of the benefits of using a tablet is simply a greater availability of tools and things throughout your applications, ways in which you can navigate your applications, the tools within those applications, and ways in which you can lay out documents. One of the things that often gets overlooked is the collaborative nature of the creative process. Most of us have to work with other people. Now, even if you're a freelancer, well, you've got to work with a client, or perhaps you work in a larger organization where you have to work with a team. Well, you need to share those ideas that you've brainstormed early in the process. You need to, again, collaborate, go back and forth, and sometimes refine your images and layouts and documents and so on. So I'm going to talk about ways in which you can improve that process. Later on, I'm going to talk about the ways in which you can configure your particular tablet for your very specific workflow. And if you don't already have a tablet, I'm going to give you some insight as to what kind of tablet might be right for you. And finally, throughout the presentation and again at the end, we're going to make sure we leave some time so that we can answer the questions that you guys have. And many times that's one of the most important and exciting times in the webinar, and that's getting some of your very specific questions answered. All right. That said, that's my agenda. Like I said, it's fairly simple, but again, very robust. We got a lot of information to cover in this time, so let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this this particular document that I was using right here, and I'm actually going to tab over to a different application. And look at this. See, now already it looks like it's the end of the webinar. So let's do this. Let me go back to Photoshop for a moment, and we're just going to change up some things. I'm going to hide Photoshop here, and I'm going to jump over to our, well, what I'll consider our first application, and that's the application where I like to talk about brainstorming ideas. What I'm using here today is an application called Sketchbook Pro. Now, depending on the type of user, you may or may not have heard of this application before. It's one of my favorites when it comes to sketching, aside from the fact that it's called Sketchbook Pro. But basically what I like to refer to it as is a digital pencil and paper. And that's essentially what I'm using it for today. I'm using it to create thumbnails and just get some initial ideas out in front of me so I can determine what it is that I want to create. Now, it's just occurred to me that I really didn't even give you an idea of what we're doing here today. Well, what I'm going to do is create a two-page spread that includes a couple of photos, some text, some type treatments, some enhanced images that we're going to apply or create in just a few moments. And I'm going to lay them all out in InDesign and use a couple different applications within the process. What I'm demonstrating for you is that a tablet is not just about Photoshop. It's not just about image enhancement, but rather an integral part of the entire creative process. And before I get too far into that whole thing, why don't I do this? I'm really curious. I know that we have some tablet users, having looked at the questions that you guys answered beforehand, before you joined the webinar. I'm really curious to find out when exactly you use your tablet. So on your screen in front of you is a question that I'd like you to answer. And the question is very simply, when do you use your tablet? Just a couple options there. Go ahead, take a moment, punch those in, and that'll give me an idea as to what it is you're doing with your tablet. So here's what you had to say. And it's pretty evenly pretty evenly split down the line. Some folks are using a tablet all the time. That's the only input device they're using. Some are using them just in Photoshop and only in creative applications. And by the way, creative applications, that's somewhat vague, but what I meant by creative applications and what I think you guys might mean is basically applications in which you draw. But that's a really interesting thing because it's not uncommon to hear that. A lot of people think that a tablet is just about drawing, it's just about painting or image enhancement or photography and so on. But in its very simplest explanation, a tablet is simply an input device. It's a means of moving your cursor around the screen. And what I'm going to do is actually backpedal just a little bit, and I'm going to show you the tablet that I was using. I got a little excited. I was all ready to kind of show you guys, the way I kind of apply my own creative process. But what I thought I would do here is I'm actually going to jump back over to Photoshop for just a moment, and I just want to show you exactly what I'm using here. So let's do this. There we go. So this is the tablet that I'm using today. This is what Wacom refers to as typically it's mainstream tablet. More people are using Intuos than any other kind of tablet out there today, and it is by far the choice for creative professionals and those that, well, what I like to say, those that aspire to create professional results. But this is basically what it comes down to. When you start out looking for a tablet, it's really all about the pen. It's about using that pen, and again, typically people are thinking it's for drawing and painting and image enhancement and so on, and they would be absolutely correct in thinking so. The pen is simply more intuitive to use than many other input devices. Where it really shines, or I should say where it most clearly shines, is in applications that are affected by pressure sensitivity. And what I mean by that is that's that ability to vary, say, the width of a brush or the opacity of a brush, all based on how hard you physically press your pen to the tablet. Now, in recent years, however, aside from the pen alone, you've got other features that enable you to increase your productivity. Those things are what you see right over here underneath my magnifying glass. These physical buttons, these are referred to as express keys. Express keys, again, are physical buttons that are designed to be assigned common keyboard shortcuts and functions. By assigning these keys some of those functions, you can very quickly access them without having to hunt and peck on your keyboard. And in some cases, you can actually set them and just forget about them altogether because you've got this illuminated display right on the tablet that will allow you to see very quickly as you glance down what that button's going to do. In addition to the express keys, you've got this ring right here in the center. This is what's called a touch ring. And by touch ring, I mean just that you can touch the ring and run your finger around it to apply a number of different functions. So we'll be demonstrating that as we go along. It's a really nice way, again, to apply a number of different functions within different applications. All right, so getting back on track, that is our Intuos 4 tablet. That's what we're going to be using here today. If you're not using Intuos 4 or you have a different tablet, you're thinking about getting a tablet, I'll be focusing on these particular features of the Intuos 4. But again, at the end, we're going to talk about tablet selection and give you an idea of some of the things you should keep in mind if you are looking for a tablet. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of that, and we'll go back over here. Excellent. So as I started to mention before, this is Sketchbook Pro, and this is really when I'm starting a project from scratch, or I've just been given a concept and there's something that I want to come up with. This is typically where I'll start. If I'm not starting, out in the field where I don't necessarily have a tablet and I have available to me a piece of paper or a sketch pad or so on, I might be jotting it there. But if I'm in my office, I typically start digital and stay digital, because I can then take some of these sketches into my applications and start to work over top of them if it's an illustration, or in the case of the layout that I mentioned we're going to go through and kind of produce, it just simply serves as a nice digital sketchbook for myself. So what I've done here is I've kind of sketched up a couple of thumbnails. Now, anybody that's been in the design field for any length of time has probably had to produce thumbnails. I got to be honest with you, it by far was never my favorite part of the process. But what I found over time is that I actually grasped it I actually went back to that way in which I was taught, and that's because I didn't like starting a project, a layout, only to be told that, you know, we want to go in a different direction. We want to use a separate image. And so again, starting with a sketch can really help the creative process. It enables you to very rapidly come up with ideas and then share them with peers. So I just kind of threw together 6 little thumbnails, some ideas that we might consider for our layout. And let's take a look at the assets that we have to work with. What I'm going to do right here is I'm going to bring open Adobe Bridge, and we'll take a look at a couple things here. These are some of the images that I was given to work with. This story is going to be about an amateur triathlete and how sponsors are taking a look at these athletes this year and really starting to treat them a little bit with a little bit more respect. So here's what we've got. We've got a couple images here, in-use images, various shots of an athlete. We're going to take some of these images and produce a layout. And in fact, to give you guys an idea of what that layout will look like, let's see if I have it in here. I don't have it as a 2-page spread just yet, but well, actually here it is. It's going to be kind of small, but here's page 1, left-hand side, and here's the right-hand side. I'm going to show you how we can lay this out using our tablet. Okay, so let's go back and look at our thumbnails for a moment. So what I was looking at here was using a couple of those different images. The one where she's running to the left over here, and one standing there with her bike. Here's that shot right here on the side where you know, we just had a kind of a profile shot of her cruising down the road, looking at a couple different spreads. And incidentally, this application, Sketchbook Pro, it is a professional application from Autodesk. One of the nice things about this particular app is that you can get a light version of it and basically use it in the same way that I'm using it right now with the purchase of an Intuos 4 tablet. It's one of the bundled applications that comes along with it. So if you have an Intuos 4, you have this tablet available to you. If you don't, if you pick it up, you can download this application for free as being a tablet owner. But anyways, think of it again just simply as a digital pencil and paper. If I were to select everything and delete it, you can see I've got a separate layer right up here. This is my thumbnail page, if you will. I can come in here and select my pencil, and by holding shift I can kind of constrain my lines if we wanted to kind of lay out what you looked at before. Let's just see. In that sample layout, what I had done was kind of taking that image of that girl kind of standing here at her bike, something kind of like this. I'm not looking to win any awards here with my sketching. Again, the idea being you're simply looking to, you know, kind of lay out what it is you have in mind. Okay, let's see here. She's kind of running this way. There we go. All right, so something like that. So assuming that we've gone through and we've kind of sketched out a couple of ideas, we can go ahead and share those with this particular application. For example, file, send email. This is going to basically wrap this particular drawing up as a JPEG, and you can email that off to someone. I'm going to hold off on that for now and rather talk about some collaboration ideas towards the end. But assuming we've got our layout in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide Sketchbook Pro. We're going to jump over to InDesign, where I've created a 2-page spread to start with. All right, so here's our spread. We're going to start laying our images in here. But before we do that, I want to make sure that they're ready to go. I want to make sure that they have been edited, retouched, however you'd like to refer to it as, and they're ready to drop into the layout. So we're going to go back over to Bridge. There we go. And we're going to grab our images. I'm going to start off with the image that we want to use on the left. I've got some images right over here. This right side final, I've kind of created somewhat of a Julia Childs version of this layout. So I've got one that's already completed, but rather what I'm going to do here is I'm just simply going to start with this one. We're going to go ahead and open this in Photoshop, and I'm going to bring my panels back. Let's go back over here. I'm going to go into full screen mode. So now you should be seeing this. There we go. Good. All right, so the image isn't bad here. Again, the idea is this is an amateur triathlete, so we're not looking to glam it up necessarily, but you know, I do want to clean it up and get rid of a few elements here. So, for example, I want to bring up, you know, some fill light in the side where her face is in the shadows. At the same time, I also want to clean up, you know, right down here along the bottom, this street or this driveway, as it may be. You just, you know, again, basically clean it up a little bit. This is not a Photoshop, it's not a very specific Photoshop webinar. So hopefully no one here is looking for some overwhelming image enhancement techniques, but I am going to give you a couple of ideas here. Pressure sensitivity that I mentioned before is one of the key reasons why you want to use a tablet. It is that pressure sensitive functionality that gives you a much greater level of control that you wouldn't otherwise get if you were just using a mouse. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm using a hard edge brush. I brought open my brush preview window for a moment. I've got shape dynamics turned on, and in Photoshop CS5 or higher, you'll see a little option up on the options bar there. What I'm doing here is I'm simply toggling pressure sensitivity on or off to affect the size of my brush. I'm holding down the Option key or Alt key and essentially selecting a source point, which was right over there. And in fact, as I start to paint here, you're going to see very, very small the crosshairs from which which is the source. And I'm just kind of getting rid of some of this stuff here. It's not going to be the focal point, so I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time there. But I'm going to give you a couple of ideas as to how you can kind of clean up your images a little faster maybe than you have in the past. You've most likely used the clone stamp tool before. Great tool, obviously. But it can also be enhanced, or I should say the overall process can be enhanced when you combine it with the healing brush or the spot healing brush. So in this case, this area happens to be somewhat out of focus. The depth of field is a little shallower here, so I can get a halfway decent job done with the clone stamp tool. And then what I can do is I can go back and clean it up a little bit with the healing brush. And again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. I'm just kind of getting rid of some of the obvious things, whatever this little shadow thing is here. And there we go, something like that. Maybe a little bit down here. There we go. So now, assuming that this is it, actually this is really bothering me. I got to take care of this right over here. Little area in the street. All right, assuming that was all we wanted to do, now we can come back and select that spot healing brush. Again, one of a couple of dozen pressure sensitive tools in Photoshop. What this one is going to allow me to do is basically blend in, some of the harsh areas that might have been left behind from that from the clone stamp tool. So let's just do a couple little things over here. There we go. So again, really nice to start off with that clone stamp tool, but then kind of clean it up just a little bit with that spot healing brush. All right, there we go. So here's our before, and there's our after. Let's add a little fill light there up in the face. I'm going to go down in my layers panel, and I'm just going to select levels. And I'm just going to use one of the default, one of the presets here, and I'm just going to lighten up my shadows and see what that does for me. That looks awful. I'm not going to do that. Rather, let's see here, a little lighter. Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to make a lie around me. I'm going to change directions here. In fact, rather what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the blend mode from the layer to screen, and that's actually going to lighten it up quite a bit. Let's focus right here on the face. It looks pretty awful to me, to be honest with you. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep we're going to use the layer mask that comes along with this levels adjustment. I'm going to fill it with black by going under Edit, Fill, Contents using black. That's going to mask out that adjustment. And now I'm going to use my pressure sensitive paintbrush to selectively reveal that screen layer, if you will, or the adjustment layer that's whose blend mode has been set to screen. All right, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make sure I go into my brush presets, and I'm just going to select a nice soft round brush. Let's see here. This one looks pretty good. We're going to turn off this option up here at the top. And now I've got transfer turned on and control set for pen pressure. Okay, now what this means is I'm going to adjust the opacity and the flow of my brush based on how hard I physically press my pen to the tablet. If I were to get a larger brush, we can actually see what's going to happen a little more clearly in the brush preview window right down here. All right, so let's close that up, and now you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, when I'm painting with white on this black layer mask, what's going to happen is, again, I'm simply lightening up the area that we want to bring in a little fill light to. All right, so now I'm going to turn off the visibility. There's our before, there's our after. So we added just a little bit of fill light there, not a lot, just enough to, again, bring her forehead right there out of the shadows. All right, so there's our image. That's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So File, Save As, right side, Edit. How about this? We'll just say today. That way we'll know it. All right, so there's that one. And I've got another image that's already set up for the layout, so I'm gonna go ahead and ignore that one for now. And now we'll go ahead and jump into InDesign and start putting some of these images in place. So we're going to hide Photoshop, and we're going to tab right over to InDesign to where we have our spread already laid out. We're going to need to start dropping these in here. So what I'm going to do is hit Command or Control D on my keyboard. That's the place function. We're going to go out and look for those images. In Photos, there's that right side Edit Today. That's the one we just created. We'll go ahead and click OK or Open. And I'm just going to simply tap with my pen right about there. I'm going to hold my Shift key down. We're going to constrain this. We're just going to drag it out right about there. That looks pretty good. I'm dropping this in here because I kind of laid this out earlier and I have a vague idea of where I want it. So here's my frame, and I'm just going to kind of somewhat drag it into place. I don't care if it reaches over just a little bit. Now I need to fit this image to the frame. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of one of the features on the tablet that's set that I've assigned a function called Radial Menu. Now what I've done here, and by the way, I'm going to hold down one of these buttons to bring up a heads-up display and show you what I'm talking about. In this particular case, what I've done is I've set up my Express keys specifically for InDesign. And I've actually gone ahead and done this for a couple of applications. But in InDesign, I'm constantly placing images and moving them around and such. So what I've done is I've created what's called a radial menu that has a number of different functions that I apply often. So for example, if you'll notice, to the right of all these Express keys is some white text that says what it's going to do. Third one from the bottom is set to radial menu. So I'm going to release this Express key and point your attention to my cursor, which is somewhat in the center of the screen, and I'm going to hit a button on my tablet that's set to that radial menu. What happens is I get this heads-up display on my screen that is assigned to a number of different functions. So as I kind of hover my pen over some of these individual slices, like I like to call them, I'm going to hover over this one right here that says Fill Frame Proportionately, or Fill Frame Prop. This is a text message that I entered in here, and I'm going to talk about how I created this radial menu towards the end of our webinar today. But by simply tapping on that slice, if you will, it performs that particular function. Okay, so now if I have my direct selection tool, what I can do is I can move that particular image inside of that frame to where, well, to where I like it. So we're going to go ahead with something like that. So that looks pretty good. Let me bring up my margins there. There we go. And I'm just going to move this image over just a little bit. We can tweak it a little bit later if we want to. All right, let's go ahead and add another image. I'm going to hit Command or Control D once more, and let's go find that other image. This particular image is called Left Side Final, and I'm going to click OK. Again, in the same exact way, I'm just going to simply tap, and I'm just going to drag this out with my Move tool. There we go, something like that. And once again, I'm going to hit the button on the side of my tablet that I've set to Radial Menu, and I'll click Fill Frame Proportionately, and that's going to move that image there. If I want to move it around a bit, I can select my direct selection tool and kind of place it, get it kind of where I think I want it. That looks pretty good. There we go. So there's the beginning of our layout. Now I want to add some text, but before I do that, I'd like to have a little bit of separation between these two photos. So I'm actually going to tap on my my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to add a little bit of color here. I'm just going to add this little white bar, and I'm going to change the color. We'll bring our colors out. We'll just make it white, and I want to fill it with white, and I want to make sure that I don't have any stroke. So we'll go ahead and do that. There we go. So now if we take a look at our bar, kind of move it in place. So what I have in mind here is I basically want to make sure that my text that I'm going to place right on the left side towards the spine isn't going to get lost. So I'm going to move this bar over just a bit, and I'm going to change the, let's see here, do we have this selected? There we go. I'm going to move this over, this frame, select my direct selection tool, and we're just going to kind of position this runner right about there. That looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to hide these margins and these guides for just a moment so we can see what's going on. There we go. All right, so there's kind of we kind of have our spread. We need to lay some text in here now. So let me bring my margins and my guides back. There we go. I'm going to select my text tool, and what I had in mind is a headline that goes right around here, and I'm just going to drag that text selection box out, tapping, dragging down to the right, and we need to find some text. So what I've done here is I've got a text document that has some text that we can simply copy and paste. There we go. So here's our headline, amateur. There we go. We're going to throw that in there. We can't really see that, so let's zoom in just a bit. I'm going to select it, tapping, dragging up with my pen, and let's see here. We need a different font. Let's go to I'll tell you what. Let's go to Arial Black, something nice and bold. All right. Then we need a different size. I can come over here and I can start to tap up or select a different size and so on. But one of the things I like to do when I don't necessarily have a particular guideline is I like to use one of the features on the tablet called the touch ring, which I mentioned earlier, and I'm actually going to tap the button in the center a couple of times so it stays up on my screen. But what you'll see here in the ring is you've got a smaller circle in the center. That is what's called the touch ring toggle. And by tapping that button a couple of times, what you're going to do is you're going to scroll through 4 individual functions that have been assigned to this touch ring. Now in this case, what I want to do is I want to adjust the size of my font. Okay, so you saw it there for a moment. Now when I run my finger around that ring, I can basically dial in a size. Now again, I don't have a particular size in mind. All I'm looking to do is really kind of fill the space at this point. So I've just kind of run my finger around the ring, and in fact, if you look on the options bar up at the top, you can see that at this point it's 60 points. There we go. So let's see there. There we go. Now I want to change the color, something that's going to match the layout. So what I thought I'd do is grab my eyedropper tool, and I'm just going to pick up a color off this girl's shirt. There we go. So we've got it right there. And I'm going to adjust the kerning. I don't really like how far spaced out it is. So I'm going to select all the text. I'm once again going to use that touch ring toggle, and I'm going to select adjust kerning. And in the same exact way, all I got to do is adjust right or left, and we can kind of play around with the text. There we go. I like that little bunched up look a little bit more. In fact, why don't we go just a little bit more? There we go. I like how that the T and the E come together. So we'll go ahead and change that size now, and we'll bring that up just a bit more. There we go. I'm going to drag this over to the right. Now, just for the sake of argument, I really like kind of splitting, objects. So I'm going to move this bar around a little bit right there, and maybe even make it a little bit thinner. All I'm looking to do here is really kind of separate, separate the lines a bit. Okay, we'll go with something like that. I think that well, we won't have to tweak it too much. We'll go ahead and leave it at that. And it looks like our image might be just a little bit behind there, so I'll move that over. All right, so there we've got some text. Now we need our copy. So let's go back over here, and we'll select this text. Once again, using my type tool, go ahead and drag this out. I'm going to paste. Zoom in a little bit so we can see that. I'm going to select all of it, Command or Control A, select all, and this time we're going to go with Myriad Pro. This particular magazine hypothetically uses Myriad Pro for their type or for their body copy. We'll go ahead and change this to white. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Again, don't have a particular size in mind, so I think I'll just adjust the size using that ring. That looks pretty good, and it would not appear that our type changed. So let's do that. No, it didn't. Let's go. Myriad Pro. There we go. That looks better. I think this would be better actually, all caps. So I'm going to select this once more, tapping, holding my pen down to the tablet, dragging up to the left. I'm going to go ahead and go into our type, Command or Control T, and let's just select all caps. And now that we've changed that, we're going to need to adjust the size a bit more. Let's see here. That looks pretty good. And I think I'll just change the size of the box, kind of dial this in a bit. Not quite there. Alright, let's see here. Well, we'll just leave it at that. I want to get that amateur in there. There we go. Okay. So let's just change that size just a little bit, just so it kind of punches in. Alright. I think we'll leave it at that for now. We won't play around with it too much more. And we can drag that over. And if we really need to, we can go ahead and move this box over. But well, I'll tell you what, we're just going to leave it alone for now. We can come back and change it later on if it gets lost in the spine. Anyways, okay, so there is our, let's just call that our layout. I'm going to, again, hide some of those guides, hide my margins, and deselect. We'll take a look at that. Assuming that that's at least the rough draft of our layout, let's go with that. I'm going to hit Command or Control E on my keyboard, and we're just going to export this. And we'll just call this the, I don't know, we're going to call this the, you know, amateur athlete, well, whatever, we'll just call this the athlete story. And we'll just send this off to, well, just save it to our desktop for now. I'm going to make sure that I have spreads turned on, and we'll go ahead and export. And this is going to open up now in Acrobat, so we can take a look at this. Now, keep this in mind. Let's imagine, if you will, that you've created this, this draft. You've sent it off to whatever, a peer, a client, what have you, someone else to review it. And they've said, you know what, Wes, it looks okay. I kind of like the layout, but you know, maybe we want to change this photo here. Maybe we want to convert this to black and white. You know, so they can jot notes using Acrobat on here. And oh, by the way, you know, it'd be really nice if the text kind of lined up over here on the left-hand side, and maybe this white bar is in the wrong place or what have you. And you know what? There's this little icon that we're using right here, and it's not in there. So add the graphic that we had previously discussed, or something like that. From there, they can go ahead and kick that back to you, or again, maybe you're the one that's annotating the document. You can kick it over to someone else for review. All you have to do is click on the Share button right here at the upper right-hand corner. You can attach it to email by just clicking that, going ahead and attaching. That's going to launch your email application. Or you can use a feature called Adobe Send Now. And the free version, which comes with all the versions of Acrobat, 9.0 and later, I believe it is, you can email this PDF using their online service. It's similar if you've ever used like Send Now, and I'm trying to think of a couple of the other ones that I've used before. But anyways, it's basically an email sending service so that you can avoid some of the restrictions that some email service providers have. So anyways, I'm not going to go ahead and send that, but again, that's the way you can go ahead and send that document off to someone for review. All right, so assuming that we've gotten that and we decided we wanted to change some things, we want to take into account some of the annotations that were made on this document. Let's go ahead and close this up. We don't want to save this particular PDF. We'll jump back over to InDesign. Well, one of the things that we wanted to do was change this image on the left to a black and white. So I'm going to right-click, holding the front button down on my pen within InDesign, and I'm going to go ahead and edit. Where are we at here? Edit with, edit original. There we go. We're going to edit the original, which in this case is the Photoshop document. I had gone ahead and actually created a black and white version just to save time, but assuming that that wasn't there, or just to give you an idea of what I did here, for those that are familiar with Nik software, I used one of their plugins called Silver Effects Pro. By far one of my favorite ways in which we can convert an image to black and white. But if you didn't have that, you want to convert an image to black and white, a number of different ways. Here's the down and dirty, most awful thing you could do to an image, and that's just to desaturate the heck out of it. That said, that's pretty flat compared to what I created with Silver Effects Pro. But anyways, we wanted a black and white image here. I've got one. I'm going to go ahead and click Save, Command S or Control S. We'll go back over to InDesign, and there it's going to update on the fly. So that looks good. Wanted to throw a little graphic up here in the upper right-hand corner. Well, assuming we didn't have a graphic, let's say we needed to create a graphic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to Illustrator. So I've got Adobe Illustrator open. I'm just going to create a new document, Command or Control N, and I'm going to grab a brush. What we want to do is we want to add just a little kind of a graphic of a runner. So what I'm going to do here is just I want to make sure that I'm just simply stroking the illustration that I have in mind. I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and I've selected this this art brush over here, and I'm just going to kind of scribble right there, and we just want to create a little runner. And I don't have any particular preferences in mind. Let's just go something like that. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. All right, I'm going to select everything. Use my selection tool, dragged out. I want to change this to white because I know that it's going to be white, or I know that it's going to be on the blue sky background, which is where what I have in mind. So I'm going to save this so that everything is white. We'll just save this as runner. And we can save this into that folder that I had on my desktop. And actually, now that I think of it, I actually already named something runner. So we're just going to go runner 2. And I'll click save. We'll click OK. Let's tab back over to InDesign. Once again, I'm going to hit Command or Control D to place the element. And let's see here, runner 2. There we go. I'll click open. And we'll just tap it right there. Now that's a pretty large image. Let's drag this right over here. Let's change the size of this particular image. I don't think we need it that big. Once again, using the radial menu that I created, I'm going to fill this frame proportionately. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit it to the frame. There we go. And now we'll just move the element around just a bit, right about there. Let's make sure that we've got our margins visible. And we'll just creep outside the margin just a bit. There we go. I don't know. Maybe that's a graphic for a particular series of articles, what have you. But anyways, what I was hoping to do there was simply demonstrate for you that using a tablet is not just about a single application. It's not just about drawing and painting. Rather, you can use that pen in literally any application. I was going to go ahead and tweak this text, but for the sake of time, I'm going to leave that alone. I think you guys understand what I'm talking about there. You can go ahead and experiment, move some elements around, but really it's about using a tablet throughout the creative process. All right, let's just do that one last time. I'm going to hit Command or Control E. We will export this particular PDF and replace the one that we had before. Spreads is already selected, and there is our 2-page spread. Let me get back out so we can see the entire image. So there you go. We just kind of very quickly drop some elements into our layout, move some type around. We enhance the images a little bit by using the clone stamp tool, the healing brush, as well as the paintbrush to kind of bring a little bit more highlight into the face and again clean up the street down there or the driveway. So keep that in mind. A tablet, again, is not just about Photoshop. It's not just about drawing and painting, but rather can be used throughout the creative process. And it's not just, again, that pen. It's about taking advantage of the features on the tablet, those express keys, those touch strips, or touch rings, I should say. So that said, let's do this. I think what I'd like to do is switch gears a little bit and talk about how it is that I set my tablet up. That's often a popular question. I saw a couple of questions coming in here, and some folks were asking me how they know how to set their tablet up, or how do you figure out what it is that you should set your tablet up for? And that's a great question. It's something that that I honestly struggled with originally. So I'm going to close up a couple of images here. Go ahead and hide some of this stuff. And let's see here. We'll go ahead and get rid of our bridge. And I'm going to bring open my tablet control panel. Now, some folks have tablets. Obviously, some folks don't. Some folks are using Windows. Some are using Mac. Regardless of whether or not you have a tablet, what you're going to want to do once you get that tablet is spend a little bit of time in the tablet control panel. This is where you're going to customize the features on the tablet to take advantage of some of the things that I showed you here today. So, for example, I have 2 tablets that I use quite often. I have a Cintiq 20WSX, that's what you see up in there, as well as my Intuos 4 Medium. That's the one I've been using today. The Intuos 4 Medium tablet, by far our most popular tablet. It's the tablet that's most desirable by professional photographers, designers, and illustrators. But here's those features that I was talking about before. You have a couple different tools that you can customize. Obviously, the pen, that's what most people gravitate towards when they think about getting a tablet. I haven't really set I have not set my pen up for all applications. Rather, I'm using the defaults, which you can see right here, which is set to right click and a double click. I do actually change the side switch or the buttons functions based on my use of Photoshop, so I'll show you that in a few moments. But we also have another tool that we can customize, and those are functions. And functions are where you're going to find your express keys. Those are the physical buttons on the tablet. Your touch ring, that was the ring that I was using to adjust the brush size, the font size and the kerning in InDesign. I'm going to skip over display toggle for now. That's a feature that's designed primarily for those folks that are using dual displays. If we have a little time at the end and people have some questions, perhaps we can get into a little bit further, but I want to make sure that, that we're addressing some of this other stuff first. And by far one of my favorites here, this is that radial menu. Now, incidentally, you're seeing an example of what a radial menu looks like, but you don't see all my settings in there. That's because you can assign to your tablet and your pen application-specific settings. And in fact, if you see in the application row, right there in the center, I have next to all other applications, Photoshop CS 5.1 and InDesign 5.5. Those applications were added with my particular workflow in mind. So if you had an application that you wanted your express keys and touch ring and so on set up specifically for that application, all you have to do is click on this little plus sign to the right of the application row and simply select it. So for example, well, I don't have Illustrator in there yet, so if I was to tap on Illustrator, because it's currently running, and click OK, you'll see that it now appears in that row. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. That's not what I want in there right now, but rather I'm going to focus on Photoshop and InDesign. I'm going to tap on InDesign first, and we're going to come over here to Express Keys. Now, what you want to set your Express Keys up for is very particular to your workflow. This is the thing, these are some of the things that I do most often when I'm within InDesign, grouping items, moving them around, and so on. But it's really about what you do. And all I've done here to set these up is set them to individual keystrokes. So for example, I'm going to select this very first one right at the very top. And in fact, if I hold my if I hold one of the buttons down, set to show settings, you're going to see, what this heads-up display looks out. This is the layout of the express keys on my Intuos 4 Medium. All right, so the very top one I want to set to a keystroke. So I tap, drag down, and select keystroke. And I'm going to clear this, and we're just assuming that this had not been set up yet. I'm going to hit Command or Control G, which is the keyboard shortcut to group items, and I'm just going to type group items. And then I'll click OK. Now, when I'm in InDesign, I hit that top button. It's going to basically, whatever I have selected is going to group those items together. I think you get the point here, and I'll go down the line. Again, ungroup items, selecting my Move tool, go into presentation mode. Towards the bottom, I've got precision mode, which I skipped over. This is a very important function, in fact. Precision mode, for those that aren't familiar with it, essentially increases the... Well, all right, before I say that, I don't want to set false expectations. It's not what happens technically, but essentially what precision mode does is it temporarily increases the resolution of your tablet so that your cursor moves very, very slowly so that you can very precisely drop elements on a particular guide. Or again, just simply move them with more precise movement. As opposed to simply relying on your shaky hand from the 2 or 3 lattes you had that morning. So if you've got some very precise movements or guides that you need to place images on, by simply holding down that express key that is set to precision mode, you can more smoothly move elements around your document or your image. All right, so precision mode, that's one of the options that you can select within the tablet control panel. And in fact, most of these are, with the exception of this bottom one. Radial menu, that's the option that I showed you before, which I'm going to get into in just a moment, how to set that up. Show settings, that's that function that brings up the heads-up display. A little question mark on your tablet will bring up the show settings function and basically give you that heads-up display with an indication of what that particular express key is set up for. Finally, and this is by far one of my favorite functions. It's the one that I actually set up when I first got my my tablet with an express key on it, and that was to the keystroke undo. Command or Control Z, and I simply named it undo. Again, I want to remind you, this is really all about how it is that you use your applications. That's what I happen to set them up for InDesign, but I'm going to tap on the Photoshop icon now, and you're going to see that my whole layout is going to change. When I tap on Photoshop, you can see a bunch of other keyboard shortcuts, but again, they're specific to that application, and again, specific to my particular workflow. So what I typically do in a workshop is I ask people to think about what it is that they do most often. That's what you want to set up your express keys for. All right, let's go back over to InDesign, and I'm going to click on the Touch Ring tab, and you can see what I've set up here. I've changed all of these 4 individual functions to do the things that I apply when I'm using InDesign. For example, adjusting the kerning, the font size, and leading of my type. I also like to zoom in or out. And simply by pressing that ring, or excuse me, that button right there in the center, the touch ring toggle, that's what's going to enable you to change the function of that particular ring. In addition to that, you can also slow the function down. So for example, with font size and kerning, I didn't want to just rapidly zoom through my font sizes. Rather, what I wanted to do was just kind of slowly step up to it. So I drag that slider down to almost its slowest position. Again, this requires a little bit of experimentation, and obviously how fast you want to perform a function depends on what it is that you've set it up for. All right, I'm going to go over to radial menu for a minute. This is by far one of my favorite features, and unfortunately it's probably one of the most underutilized. And again, that's because it takes a little bit of thought. And don't get me wrong, I was in the same boat. You know, I looked at this and thought, wow, there's so many options. What should I do first? And what I started with was, what is the very basic thing that I do all the time? And over time, I found myself thinking, wow, that'd be something really cool to put right here in this radial menu so I could just, with a tap of my pen, access it. So it doesn't have to be foolproof, you know, or absolutely, you know, the last setting you ever apply the first time you open it. But here's a couple of ideas. When you're using the radial menu, essentially what you get is a pie. I like to call it the pie, with 8 individual slices. Each one of those slices can be assigned a keyboard shortcut. So for example, the one that's selected right up here at the top, I've selected keystroke. In this case, it was Command-Shift right bracket key or Control-Shift right bracket key, and that brings objects to the front. And then in the label, I just simply named it that. Again, send to back, clipping path options, frame edges, text frame options. What you set up in your radial menu, just like your express keys, is all based on your particular workflow. It takes a little thought, but once you've done it, you set it up, you leave it alone, and again, right there at your fingertips, you've got all of your favorite functions and keyboard shortcuts. So keep that in mind. It's all based on keystrokes. So each one of these slices, as I select it, you'll see that they're simply set to keystrokes. And all you'd have to do, Command or Control, or Control and Windows key, P, that's going to bring you your document setup. Anything that you can assign to a keyboard shortcut, you can throw into a radial menu or an express key. All right. Well, I wanted to you know, make sure that we kind of stayed a little bit on track. We're running up at our hour mark. I wanted to go over a couple last minute things, and then we're going to stick around and answer a few more questions. But basically, yeah, people ask oftentimes about which tablet's right for them, and I know a number of people indicated that they were interested in getting a tablet. So this is what I wanted to leave you with as far as tablet selection goes. We make a number of different size tablets based on individuals' particular needs. Now, we've got a large graphic design audience today. Obviously, we have different types of webinars that we offer where we have different folks you know, joining us, photographers, illustrators, and animators, and so on. But from a graphic design perspective, the Intuos 4 Medium is one of our most popular tablets. It is essentially the flagship tablet, if you will, in the Intuos line. It's not so large that it takes up a ton of room on your desk. It's not so small that it hinders your ability to navigate with precision. I wanted to point you to a couple of additional resources that are available to you if you're not already familiar with them. If you're not already a friend of ours on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/Wacom. Friend us there. We put a number of additional webinars and information, late-breaking news on Wacom, Wacom products, events, and so on our Facebook page. We also tweet these things as well, so if that's your preferred method of getting info on things, you can follow us on Twitter. We have a number of videos available on YouTube. In fact, we just launched a new beta version of well, for all intent and purposes, the way our YouTube channel is laid out. We launched that yesterday. You can go to youtube.com/Wacom to see additional information and videos there. Lastly, I want to point your attention to this website, tabletgurus.com. This is a personal website that Joe and I have put together. It's currently in beta. It's not available to the public, but as an attendee of this webinar, we were going to follow up with folks and let them know when the site goes live and actually give you access to the beta site. So if you're interested in getting some pen tablet tips, techniques, and resources for all sorts of different applications, go to tabletgurus.com today, click on the image within that page, and enter your name to be informed of the site's official launch. We're going to send out that beta invite either tonight or tomorrow. So again, you'll be some of the first to get access to that particular site.